Let's look at international news now. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights says the fear instilled in a significant portion of the Afghan population is profound, given the history of the Taliban in that country. Thousands of Afghans fearing for their lives and future descended on Kabul airport over the last few days in the hopes of being evacuated from that country by the United States. That has sent some 6,000 troops to assist with transfers while securing the area. It says the Taliban today declared an amnesty for all in Afghanistan and encouraged women to join their government. We cross now to SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who's speaking now with Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the former executive director of UN Women. Sherwin?
So she's still the executive director of UN Women for a few more hours. Of course, our privilege really to have the opportunity to speak with the outgoing executive director of UN Women on an issue that is very, very close to the mandate of the agency she has led here at the United Nations, as there has been a collective anxiety that has permeated these corridors at the swift ascendancy of the Taliban in Afghanistan. The executive director tweeting over the weekend, "Please spare a thought for the people and women and girls of Afghanistan. A tragedy unfolds in front of our eyes." She is now my guest, Executive Director Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. This will be the last time we get to talk. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sherwin, and good evening to your viewers.
Tell us about that tweet. You talk about a tragedy unfolding before our eyes, a great deal of concern for women and girls in particular, given the history of the Taliban, the Taliban of 2001. The Taliban of 2021 says it's a different Taliban that wants women in the government, that they will allow women to go to schools. Is that a message you're buying?
Well, we welcome the message. All we want to do as the UN and UN Women is to serve the people and the women of Afghanistan. In the last 20 years, the women of Afghanistan have worked very hard for what they have. Going to school was a big shift in Afghanistan. Women are leading governments, they are leading in the private sector, they are activists, they are human rights defenders, and right now they are scared about what could happen to them. We are hoping and praying that the worst will not happen, but I mean it's difficult to imagine what faces the people and the women of Afghanistan. They have just asked us to stay there, and we are staying and not going.
Right. I mean, the UN, of course, has a long-standing presence through its UNAMA mission since 2002. And, of course, part of that development program has been the empowerment and seeking equality for women, essentially starting from zero. You were part of a high-powered delegation from the UN led by the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed in 2019. You met with then President Ashraf Ghani. What were those conversations like? I think you went there just before an election.
Yes. Well, we could never have imagined what we have now. We were still hopeful. We were hoping that the talks in Doha would bring about a situation that takes the country forward. We still want to be hopeful that we can still be of support as the United Nations and the international community in order to make sure that we do not see the tragedy that could be in Afghanistan.
Part of your mandate, Executive Director, as the Executive Director of UN Women, has been to engage with nationalities, with countries, in an effort to change laws, to shift the nuances in terms of how society views women.
We did that in Afghanistan. Right. We changed the laws. They've got the most progressive laws on violence against women, on women's economic empowerment. These are some of the gains that we just fear we could lose. And we obviously want to wait and see what would happen. We have stretched our hands to the Afghanistan asking for peace. We don't want to see blood in Afghanistan. And many of women, young people in Afghanistan have just never known peace. So we want to see peace. We are sad that, President Ghani is not there. He's unable to sit around the table, and that we can together work for peace.
A question was posed to the Secretary General's spokesperson today about whether the UN would engage with the Taliban, given that the Taliban is listed as a terrorist group by the UN Security Council. What does that engagement look like, given the fact that they are now the de facto leaders of Afghanistan, even though there's so many grey areas around that move? Do you talk and sit down to the Taliban and say, listen, this is what we want?
Look, we are concerned about protecting civilians. We are concerned about the protection of women and girls. Whatever we need to do to protect people, whatever we need to do to avert bloodshed, we will try and do. I don't know myself what that would look like, but we will do whatever we can.
So what would your message then be to a Taliban, right? To say, these are the benefits of empowering women. This is what gender equality means for even a country like Afghanistan, where the Taliban is in power. How do you explain this so that it resonates certainly within their planning and their thinking?
Well, I think Talibans have got wives, mothers, and sisters. I think they probably understand what it is to lose someone you love and live with. And we hope that we can all appeal to the best yeah.
You took this position in 2013. You served 2 terms. It's 8 years as the head of UN Women. These are tough questions. Of course, they're tough questions. You've often talked about how you take 10 steps forward and you take 12 steps back. This is one of those moments again, even on your last day here.
Absolutely.
It's a constant battle. It's a pendulum that shifts. There is no silver bullet to achieving gender equality and Goal 5 in its breadth and extent.
Well, if anyone had told me that on my last day at UN Women, I would be looking at the situation in Afghanistan as it is now, I would never have believed. The situation in Haiti is just as difficult. We cannot also forget that this is the challenge that we have. The situation in Ethiopia and Tigray, the situation in Myanmar. So yes, we've come out of generation equality. We have got a lot of support for many of the things that we believe in, but we have these challenges. They are part and parcel of our lives. So our lives is a difficult cycle. Yeah, we cycle all the time.
How are you feeling today? I know you have back-to-back meetings today, even on your last day. This has been an 8-year journey. You've grown this entity. You've capacitated this entity financially and in terms of the human bodies that run this place. How are you feeling today? How are your staff feeling today? What do you look back at and say, hey, man, good job, Phumzile?
Well, it's bittersweet because I'm going to leave people that had literally become almost like family for me. But it's good to go. It's good for the organization to get a new perspective from somebody. It's also good for me to move on to other things. But really, the first thing, I just want to rest before I jump into anything else.
I want to ask you about your return to South Africa. You're saying you want to rest. I also wanted to ask you, what are you most looking forward to about moving home and moving home permanently?
I'm looking forward to time with my grandchildren. That's my first priority.
Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, always good to see you, always good to talk with you. Thank you for your service at the United Nations and for always speaking with SABC. We appreciate it.
Thank you, SABC. You've really been a good partner for UN Women, for me personally. You've really made me feel like I'm at home most of the time. Thank you.
Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the Executive Director of UN Women, for just a few more hours. This is her official day, and spending time here talking about their concerns about the trajectory of women's rights, of women's empowerment, of women's equality in the country of Afghanistan. A lot of unknowns today, but we also celebrate her time here and, of course, the successful nature of what she has been able to achieve. It's back to you, Tsepiso.
Well, Sherwin, while we still have you there, I know it may be a little bit strange because she's still standing beside you, but if I could just get you to look back on some of those interactions, the stories that you've done with her, because, I mean, you've been a big part of the mission there. So Some of the highlights maybe that you remember that thinking back, working on her, will make you think of her contribution?
Well, I think as a man, Tsepiso, it has allowed me to be able to conscientize myself, to really learn the ins and outs of what it means to empower women. By virtue of Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka arriving here as a former deputy president from South Africa, really allowed us time to spend and delve into this issue. You know, we interviewed Michelle Bachelet, the first executive director of UN Women, but when Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka arrived, it was part of our mandate really to focus on this issue, given our history in South Africa and certainly the questions and the issues that have confronted South Africans on the question of women's rights, gender-based violence in particular, the role that men need to start playing in our societies in terms of the elevation of women, the need for women's empowerment in terms of the leadership we want to see in both in politics, but also not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector, and the economic benefits that come from that. So it's certainly been an education for me personally. I think I've benefited from this experience, as I think she has too. And so we've all learned a little bit here at Tsepiso, and I've grown certainly as a man, as an individual, and as a South African.
And of course, Sherwin, congratulations to her. She's been a huge source of pride for us as a Full View team, watching her grow and blossom and, as you say, put these very important issues on the international platform. Thank you, Sherwin. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News correspondent, speaking there to Executive Director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, as he says just a few hours before she becomes the former Executive Director.